cover letter is much more than just an introduction to a resume. Actually, the name cover letter does little justice to this highly strategic piece of marketing. It really should be called an interview-generating letter, because like the resume, its purpose is to impress an employer so he or she will call you in for an interview. A powerhouse cover letter is a piece of masterful advertising, so construct it as a piece of masterful advertising. Use the basic principle of AIDA. It's been shown to work time and time again across a wide variety of media. Whether in classified ads, display ads, electronic media, or websites, the AIDA thought process applies. If you know AIDA, the principle is worth reviewing because it must be used in your cover letters. If by some chance you don't know it, here it is. Attention, interest, desire, and action. The employer is the customer, and you or your services are the product. So your resume and cover letter are your advertisement. They must follow the laws of advertising to achieve maximum results. There are hiring managers who admit to not reading a cover letter, but most employers say they read the cover letter first. So the cover letter must incorporate the AIDA principles to get the employer to read your resume. And then the resume must use the principles you've learned in the previous modules to convince the employer to call you. In one statement, this is how AIDA applies to your to get the employer to read your resume. And then the resume must use the principles you've learned in the previous modules to convince the employer to call you. In one statement, this is how AIDA applies to your cover letter and resume. To get the attention of the employer to read the resume with enough interest to create the desire to make them take the action to contact you to schedule an interview. The first action desired of the cover letter is getting the employer to read it and to continue on and read your resume. The second action desired of the cover letter is for the employer to call or contact you. Now, some cover letters have enticed the reader to call the candidate without even reading the resume. A winning cover letter is an extremely focused marketing piece, and it completely supports the specific job objective of the resume. It is sent to one specific person, typically regarding one specific job. This means you will likely need a different cover letter for each job or organization you apply to. And like the resume, it has a secret underlying structure that induces prospective employer to take action. That structure is to grab attention, arouse interest, stimulate desire, and motivate action. This leads to 3 steps in writing a cover letter. In the first step, you grab attention. And here's the good news. For the cost of some paper and a stamp, or virtually nothing via the internet, you should already have your prospects' undivided attention. They are usually sitting down with your advertisement in front of them, your resume and cover letter, with the sole purpose of reading it. Even if only for a few seconds, you have their attention. This is your first big chance. Now, the cover letter must generate enough interest for the reader to read it all and enough desire to take the first action. What action? The action of reading your resume. The cover letter can also serve a dual action purpose and assist in generating the action to call you. Following the basics of layout and grammar is a must to maintain interest, and creating good copy will encourage a reader to continue. If you've been following along in this specialization, you know you should find out all you can about the employer and the position. Read and reread their employment advertisements. Read the ads for other positions within the same organization. Look for similarities in wording. Then, using the key skill words the employer has used in the ad, using the power vocabulary that you've learned, and conveying your limited availability, you create the desire to find out more about you. You'll learn more about conveying limited availability in the third lesson. The action you want from a cover letter and resume is a call to schedule an interview. This involves more than placing your phone number on the letter and resume. This involves a specific strategy that you'll also learn more about in the third lesson of this module. Recruiting experts say that only about 15% of cover letters follow the principles of AIDA. In the next lesson, you'll learn how to make sure that your cover letters do. In this lesson, you'll learn about the nuts and bolts of putting together a cover letter. You've learned about the importance of holding a reader's attention and interest, then building desire into a call to action. Let's talk about holding the interest of a busy and harried prospective employer. The first thing he or she will notice about your cover letter is its appearance. So use white space, use short, focused phrases. Use bullets to help the reader glean important information from the letter. Bullets cut through the clutter to emphasize key points. Just as in a resume, these bold dots immediately draw the reader's attention to your key strengths. Think of it this way. If an employer has only a few seconds to evaluate you, what do you want him or her to see first? You want him or her to focus on your strongest skills and capabilities, and on why you're a perfect match for the organization. That's what you get with bullets. The perfect cover letter is about 3 to 4 paragraphs in length. Never make the mistake of cramming all your text into one long, jumbled paragraph. This makes it visually unappealing and the first one to get pitched. The ideal paragraph is 3 to 4 lines long. Get to the point right away and make sure your ideas are easy to follow. Once you've finished editing the cover letter, print it on the same paper stock as your resume. This way, the entire package the employer receives has a consistent, professional appearance. Now, what about the actual writing? Before you begin, make sure you have the correct information to put in the heading of your cover letter. The date, the name of the person doing the hiring, his or her specific title, organization name, and complete address. The correct format is shown here. The text is left justified with the date on the first line, followed by a blank line, then the address information with name and title at the top. The name of the person doing the hiring, his or her specific title, organization name, and complete address. The correct format cover letter: the date, the name of the person doing the hiring, his or her specific title, organization name, and complete address. The correct format is shown here. The text is left justified with the date on the first line, followed by a blank line, then the address information with name and title at the top. The cover letter should be addressed to the person responsible for making the hiring decision, most likely a director or department head. If you don't know who will specifically make the hiring decision, call the organization and ask who you should address the letter to. That's also a great chance to get the first and last name spelled correctly along with the specific job title. Where you start the first line depends on the length of the cover letter. In Microsoft Word, I generally set the top margin at 1.5 inches, the bottom margin at 3 inches, then set the vertical alignment to center with 1.25. Where you start the first line depends on the length of the cover letter. In Microsoft Word, I generally set the top margin at 1.5 inches, the bottom margin at 3 inches, then set the vertical alignment to center with 1.25-inch margins left and right. That usually produces an attractive visual layout. Always double-check the address information. Remember, if the address is wrong, your cover letter will not get read, no matter how good it is. And if you use the wrong job title for the prospective employer, especially if you downgrade the actual job title, there's no way you're going to impress him or her with your abilities. It is very, very important to spell the employer's name correctly. I knew a hiring manager whose first name was Leslie, spelled Leslee, instead of the more conventional Leslie. She threw away any letter in which her first name was misspelled. That was her quick test of an applicant's aptitude. So make sure you spell the employer's name correctly. The next impression your letter makes is in the greeting, also known as the salutation. Don't take the easy way out and write, "Dear Director of Human Resources." The Human Resource Director is most often not the one in charge of the hiring decision. He or she usually manages day-to-day personnel activities. Don't use "Dear Sir." In today's world, you cannot assume that the person making the hiring decision is a man, and you should never use sexist language. A woman should always be addressed as Ms., unless you know she's married or has a professional title. And don't use my all-time least favorite, "to whom it may concern." This greeting tells an employer in the very first line that you are lazy and have not even done the most basic homework on the organization. It's a great way to kill your chances. Take the time to get the name of the person in charge of hiring and use that. If the name is unisex, like Pat Smith, simply write "Dear Pat Smith" and use a comma after the salutation, not a colon. Remember that the cover letter is a marketing piece. You want to build rapport with the hiring manager from the start, so use the informal comma instead of the formal colon. Next comes your opening paragraph. It should accomplish two goals: to make a connection with the reader and to heighten his or her interest. So how do you manage that? You could write something like this: employers do like to know how an applicant found out about the position. That helps them figure out where their marketing is most effective. But an opening like this is not much of a hook. Here's a more personal approach. The job posting from AstraZeneca for an enterprise architect started with the question answered here. By picking up on that question and opening with "to answer your question," this opening makes an immediate connection with the reader. Answering yes allows you to create this interest. So how do you manage that? You could write something like this: Employers do like to know how an applicant found out about the position. That helps them figure out where their marketing is most effective. But an opening like this is not much of a hook. Here's a more personal approach. The job posting from AstraZeneca for an enterprise architect started with the question answered here. By picking up on that question and opening with "to answer your question," this opening makes an immediate connection with the reader. Answering yes allows you to create the sense of an ongoing dialogue. An even better opening is possible if you can claim a personal connection immediate connection with the reader. Answering yes allows you to create the sense of an ongoing dialogue. An even better opening is possible if you can claim a personal connection with someone in the organization. Perhaps you know someone, maybe even through LinkedIn, or you've met someone at a job fair. Seize the opportunity. It gives you a little hidden advantage over other applicants. This is also the way to start a cover letter if you're applying for a job that you found out about through networking. An employer will say, "Oh, he knows Mike." Well, if Mike recommended him, he must be worth talking to. Then, if Mike knows you, he can provide a glowing and very valuable recommendation. If you've already managed to make direct contact with the person in charge of hiring, this too puts you one up over other applicants who didn't exert that little extra effort. So you can open with something like this. Not surprisingly, one of the best ways to grab a prospective employer's attention is with a compliment. So you try a bit of strategic personal flattery like this. Or you give the organization a pat on the back. With an opening like this, not only are you tooting the hiring manager's horn, you're showing him that you did your homework. Okay, here's your opening. Next comes your body paragraphs. Here's where you convince the employer that you are a perfect match for the position. You get as specific as possible, using concrete examples and, where applicable, hard-hitting numbers. The body of the cover letter answers the fundamental questions that drive the hiring process. Why should the hiring manager consider you? What makes you stand out? To answer these questions, you talk about how your strong related skills qualify you for the position. For this example, you're going to be an enterprise architect, and you select the following as the most impressive and relevant points of your resume. This is your lead, the 3 top-level competencies needed for an enterprise architect. Your first competency, you'll recognize this as a leading 21st century competency. Here it's put in the specific context of an enterprise architect. This second competency highlights your relevant experience using keywords directly from the job posting. This third competency highlights your ability to work across organizational lines and in a leadership capacity. I trust you see how Mr. Smith, the chief architect at AstraZeneca, in reading this, will immediately recognize that you, an enterprise architect, have got what it takes. He'll see that before even getting to your resume. Notice also that each phrase starts with a powerful action word: solved, deployed, co-authored. These words accomplish the same goal that they did in your resume. They present you as a doer and an achiever. Your last paragraph is your close, your call to action. This is where conventional cover letter wisdom will lead you astray, but you'll learn more about that in the next lesson. For now, you're going to close the letter with this text. You'll learn the strategy behind this language in the next lesson. You then close the letter with sincerely, your name and signature. It's recommended that you sign with a blue pen because it contrasts with the black print. Here's how it looks when it's done. You'll find a full-sized version in the readings.